Here we are in Tableau for episode 25. So I've just kind of taken where I left off last week with that same data set on that 2019 happiness data. And we've sort of spoken about this data pane before, the measured dimensions. In the future we'll talk about parameters, which will appear down here. But the thing we haven't touched on here is this analytics pane. Some people don't even really register it's here. And you can do that if you want. But the analytics pane here, basically you can add an extra dimension of depth to your data by adding in some sort of pre-made analytics. It's almost in a way converting a lot of your charts into having the attributes that you would get from a box and whisker plot without having to build one and without having to have these box and whisker views. So I've started here. I've got my total score split by generosity. Now, it doesn't really mean much, but that's not the point in this because we're trying to explore this pane. So there's three different areas: summarize, model, and custom. So let's start with the constant line. So what you do is you click on it and drag into your table, and you can basically add a bit of like a reference line, or it's called a constant line, but you can choose where you want it. So if I say 10, it's going to put a line on the chart for 10, so you can compare to that constant line that you've set. For any of these things, you can then right click on them and either format, which will bring up the format pane. So just say you wanted this as a dotted orange. You could fill above, fill below, for example, if you wanted it all yellow above, and same for below. And then you can change the formatting, numbers, shading, the fonts, and you can close that like that. You can also edit it. So for constant line, there's not a huge amount you can do. You can basically choose if you want it to be a line, a band, so from say 8 to 12. See what that looks like. Again, you could choose it to be a certain colour. Say this is my this is the band that I wanted. Change the line colour. Again, constant, minimum. So we've chosen a constant, so let's stick on that for now. Could be a distribution. So, for example, using percentages of the total, with tooltips, formatting, and box plots again. But we're talking about constant lines, so let's stay on that as a basis here. So there we go, we can see that, and you can also right click and remove that. So the first one there, constant line, is kind of a good reference point. So if you said that was my goal, I want to have scores above 10, you can say, okay, well, quite a lot of these are, maybe we could sort in a sort of descending order by sum of score. Okay, nice, so you can see, okay, here's all generosities, these are all above 10, these are all below, so it's quite good. Yeah. Average, you can do this, so across the table, so this will give a mean score. So again, we could click on here. Where's our line? Here it is. So we can edit this. This is our mean average. So again, we could have this as like a dotted green, say, for this one. And you saw we got some different options. If I make this chart maybe grey so it doesn't stick out. What you might have seen when I dragged that average line is we get three different options here, and I put on table, so we've got that already. And you'll notice if I put it on any other ones, that's not going to make any difference. And if I did it on the cell, we're going to have it at the top. So basically what it means is there's three different dimensions to the data here. So what could I do? freedom to make life choices. If I put another column in here, So now we've got loads of different panes. These are called panes. If I put the average line and pane, we'll see we're getting one now for each individual pane, which is it can be really handy if you've got a few different segments of your data and things within the segment. So for example, if we just wanted to look at this one here, we've got 4 items now, and it's put the average of the pane as well as the table, which, because now the table's filtered down, it's the same as the pane, and the cell will just be each of those individual items. So for example, if I undo and we just choose the first, say 4, you can see the average for the whole table, the average for each pane, which is pretty similar to the average. And then if I put an average for the cell, obviously that's just that. So if that was split down, get insight into those 3 different levels that Tableau is working at there, the table, pane and cell level. So if I undo back out here a few steps. The next one is median, so another type of average. So if we put this across the table, if we just work at table now that we've discussed these 3 levels, we'll see we've got median here with quartiles. So we're at 25 percentile quartiles. Well, that's what quartile is, isn't it? A quarter. So if I click on that line and press edit, we can change how this works. So at the moment we've got line only. Let's again format this. Let's say that's now red median. Obviously you can go through the different bands, but let's stick to line because then it's simple. And we need this median. And it's got those quartiles already nested, which is quite nice. Again, you can format this as well. Fill above, fill below, change the text, formatting of the line. So that's a really useful one because a lot of people, it's easy to work out the average, but having a pre-built way of adding in the median is pretty nice. So it's starting to get a bit cluttered. So now we've gone through those, summarize. Well, we haven't actually, we've got totals left, haven't we? So what I can do is add a total here. So that's the sum of all those scores. So this would work better, just say if we had an average instead of a sum. So now we can see the medians and stuff, but on the end here we've got that all generous score, average score 5.407, which means that we can kind of reference against the final cell. So you might want to make that more obvious, but it's quite a really nice handy way. And obviously if we flip these around, it stays at the end, which is really nice. So yeah, that's quite a it's like a grand total column, if you like, a bit like you might use in Excel quite frequently. So I'm going to undo, so we get rid of our final column. And now we've gone through these, I'm going to delete each of these that we have on here by right-clicking and just pressing remove on each of the lines, like that. So next up, let's speak about these models. Some more really handy analytics items on the analytics pane under this model. So we start with average 95% CI. Now CI is confidence interval. So if we start with the table again, we've got a nice average line as we did before. I'll duplicate that, you can see. But it's got a 95% confidence interval, which means it's sort of highlighting the range that is within 95% of that average score, and that's plus and minus from that average line. So that's really handy to then see, okay, well this item, for example, is near my average, and we can see that these ones here are within 95%, These ones jump out top, but this one here is above the average, but it's within 95% of that figure, plus and minus. So these items here, which is really handy to use on some occasions, and the same with the median. So it's adding this CI band, the confidence interval band. So our medium is 6.17, and you can see these are the middle numbers within 95%. So I'm going to get rid of these for cluster. And it's basically clustering, automatically clustering our data. So it's automatically chosen 3 here, and it said basically there are 3 distinct different groups of scores within our data. So this is really handy for a clustering technique. So often people use sort of deciles, so you'd have 10. You see the cluster of 10 is this grey one up here, score of 23.19, and it's kind of like an outline, and it's really high up, so it sits within its own cluster, cluster 10, within our sort of cluster model that we've basically built off the sum of score here. You could change what this is, you can put it averages, whatever, which way makes sense for this one. And it's just a really handy way of grouping variables together, and it automatically finds them. So it's saying cluster 1 here, all these blues, they're all kind of similarly scored before it steps up into cluster 2, which is cluster 3, sorry, here. Hasn't named them in the right order, which is kind of showing 4, 2, 3, 1. But it's a really handy way of grouping up variables into groups, into clusters. That's a super cool technique that Tableau have just inbuilt for you. So I'm a big advocate for that one. And you'll notice Trendline and Forecast aren't working here. That's because we're using bar charts. So what I've done is I've added back in our grocery shop data. If you've been following this video series since the start, since we were Power BI, we use this grocery shop data set. And within that I've got dates. So I'm going to make a really simple line chart here, which will be sales by date. So I can split these out into days here within January. And from the analytics pane then I can now use Trendline, Forecast line. Similarly, when I start dragging, I get different types. We have a linear, logarithmic, exponential, polynomial, and a power line. And now because of the way that this trend is working, you can only get certain types of trend lines for your chart. So linear will just be that straight line. So we can see our sales over time here is generally going up. And now similarly we can format and edit these lines, which is really handy, so you can make them stand out, or whatever you may need to do. So different types of trend line. We've got an exponential line here. Was that exponential? Yeah. And I can drag and drop onto polynomial as well, which is like a sort of arc. And this is really handy. Forecast actually did a COVID visualization recently on this one a few months ago, and it basically extrapolates your trend. So you have to use this with a bit of a pinch of salt, but it basically extrapolates your trend and gives a confidence interval with how accurate that thinks it's going to be. Now what is quite vital with the forecasting is that you can edit the forecast and the confidence interval. So you can right click on the forecast and go down to forecast and click on forecast options. Now it will have an automatically preset sort of settings. But what we can do is change things. So for example, the forecast length, you can say I want this for another year, which will be super unreliable because we only have a few days worth of data. Or let's say, okay, I want to have, we've got 1 week's worth of data, so let's have 1 week of forecast. Or you can do until a certain date. So let's say forecast length I want for another week. You can look at the source data, so this is currently aggregated down to a day level, so let's keep it like that. And you can choose how much of the preceding data you can ignore. So how much data from your chart do you ignore to get your trend from. So for example, we had a pretty good uplifting trend here, and the last day we had really bad sales. So I might want to say let's ignore the last day because I feel that's an anomaly day, or we can keep going back. Now, as I don't have very much data here, I can't go back very far because it makes my data set too small. So let's just say we want to ignore the last one day, so we won't have data, we'll have a small gap. And there's different types, so automatic seasonality, this won't make any difference here because we have such a small amount of data. And then you can also choose the confidence interval that you want your data at. So it's preset to 95, you can change that to 90, and that will change how the forecast works here, or a 99% confidence interval. So for example, here Tableau says it's 99% confident that by the time we get to the 13th of January, this is the sort of average, so it predicts a sort of continued slight rise, but it could be, because it's 99% accurate or confident, or if we put it to 90%, it might be a bit easier for this chart, saying that it's going to be between 18,000 and 2,500 here. Good little tip with these forecasts, if you want to make them a bit more complete without the gap that automatically takes out, you can just remove this colour pill from the forecast indicator, and it sort of chamfers the forecast confidence intervals and extends the line out there, so you can see the difference, which is quite nice. Final on the custom ones, we can do it on the forecast line chart here if we want. You can add a reference line, you can do table, pane, cell. You can also do within certain data types, you could do day and sun. So if you put it in both, you'll get, if I like that, you get two lines because one for each data type. Or if I just did say for day, then I just get one like this. And you can change it, so for example, do I want this at the start, the end, or a constant, which I think is probably in this case the most appropriate. This is a date field and it knows that straight away, which is super cool. So you could say something like the 6th is the last date of real data before it goes into the forecast. Again, you can kind of format the way that looks, and so that's really useful, and you can have multiple of these. So if you wanted one for sales as well, you can drop it in there, we get our line in, and again that could be a constant. So if it was like a target, which could be something like based on a value of say 10,000, like that. And you might want to make that one sort of look similar, like that. So yeah, they're pretty handy. Similarly, you can put bands on. So you could put that also on, if we use constants again and say, well, between the 1st of January and the 1st, I need to make that constant, and the 6th that we had before, you're like, okay, this is our real data, so it'll look like that. Or conversely, you could do something like the 13th to the 6th, and that's sort of our forecasted data. So you can make it a slightly different colour just to show that. Let's remove that one. It's that kind of thing. And so that's the banded version, which again you can do on either the 3 different levels or within fields themselves. Really useful. Distribution band, similar. That drops in, very good. And we can have these based on percentages, percentiles, quantiles, or based on standard deviation. So for example, if we have percentiles, let's say percentages, shall we? And you can choose the range. So this is between 60 and 80% of our max total sum. So you could do like 10 to, I don't know, 30, if that was something you were interested in. And then it picks that out, and again you can format that. So that's absolutely disgusting, but an example of what that might look like. So you can overlay loads of these on top of each other. So if you really wanted to, you could be putting all of these on, not that you would, and then you can put the custom box plot on as well as the summarized. So let's say it's this, and that basically puts a plot against all the values to say, here, look, here's the median, that adds up. There, this is the lower quartile, upper quartile, your upper hinge, your lower hinge, if you know about the stats behind that. So yeah, that is the basically analytics pane. I've gone through the summarized, the model, and the custom elements of those over these couple of sheets. So I hope you found that really useful. Make sure you check out our other videos. We're going to keep these coming in every week. So I hope to see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for your time.